The air in the grand ballroom of the International Hotel in Las Vegas was thick with anticipation, the hum of hushed conversations, a low backdrop to the clinking of ice and glasses. Flashbulbs still popped, occasionally lingering ghosts of a press conference that had just concluded. Elvis Presley, king of rock and roll, sat at the head table, looking every inch the legend he was. His dark hair was perfectly coiffed, his eyes, usually sparkling with mischievous charm, held a depth that hinted at the countless miles and years he'd logged. He had just finished announcing his next string of shows, promising a spectacle unlike any before. Journalists, columnists, and a few lucky fans who'd managed to sneak in were starting to pack up their notebooks and cameras. Elvis. Ever the showman lingered, signing a few autographs, exchanging a quick, charming word with a reporter here and there. He seemed relaxed, almost serene, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of his public life. Then a voice cut through the fading buzz. It belonged to an older woman, a veteran reporter from a syndicated newspaper known for her gentle but probing questions. Her name was Beth Jenkins, and she'd known Elvis since he was a shy kid from Tupelo trying to make it big in Memphis. She didn't shout or clamor for attention. She simply waited for a lull and then spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Elvis," she began, and he turned his head, a polite smile on his lips. "You've spoken so much about your music tonight, your future. But if you don't mind a personal question, something more reflective. I was just thinking about your mother, Gladys. Her birthday was last week. Wasn't it stilled?" It was as if someone had pressed an invisible pause button. Every eye in the room, from the most jaded reporter to the youngest fan, swung to Elvis. Gladys Presley. Her name hung in the air, a sacred echo. She had passed away more than a decade ago in 1958, just as Elvis's star had reached its dizzying peak. Everyone knew how devastated he had been, how profoundly her death had affected him. He rarely spoke about her publicly, not in depth. It was too raw, too personal. Elvis's smile faded. His eyes, just moments ago full of light, seemed to cloud over distant. He didn't immediately answer. The silence stretched, becoming heavy, filled with unspoken memories and the collective anticipation of the room. Some reporters exchanged nervous glances, wondering if Beth had gone too far. Had she touched a nerve that should have remained undisturbed? He closed his eyes for a brief moment, a fleeting gesture that spoke volumes. When he opened them again, they were still soft, but with an intensity that pulled everyone in. It was a look that promised a journey, a glimpse behind the legendary facade. He took a slow breath, his chest rising and falling beneath the ornate stage suit he still wore. The air conditioning hummed, the only sound breaking the silence. "Gladys," he repeated softly, the name, a whisper, a prayer on his lips. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. His gaze wasn't on Beth anymore, or on any single person. It was fixed on some point in the middle distance, as if he were looking back through time. "Yes, her birthday was last week," he confirmed, his voice a little lower than usual, tinged with an unexpected tenderness. "And you're right, Beth. I don't talk about her much. It's hard, still hard, even after all these years." He paused, and a flicker of raw emotion crossed his face, quickly, masked, but not entirely hidden. He was no longer the confident performer, the king of rock and roll. For a moment he was just a son, remembering his mother. The room held its breath. No one dared to interrupt. No one reached for their recorder. It felt like they were on the precipice of something profoundly intimate, something they had no right to witness but couldn't pull themselves away from. This wasn't just a celebrity giving an answer. This was a man about to unlock a part of his soul. She was everything to me," he finally continued, his voice gaining a little strength, a quiet resolve. "My whole world, really. Before all this, before the music, before the crowds, before the lights, there was just her and Daddy, but mostly her." He smiled, then a faint, melancholic smile that tugged at the corners of his lips. "She had a way of looking at you, like you were the most important thing in the world, and to her, I guess I was. He shifted slightly in his chair, straightening his shoulders as if preparing himself for a long journey through memory lane. The room remained utterly silent, hanging on his every word. Even the clinking of glasses had stopped. It was clear that this was not going to be a quick answer or a dismissive one. Elvis was going to talk about Gladys Presley, and everyone present knew instinctively that they were about to hear something truly special. Quiet reverence in the room was palpable, a testament to the man and the woman he was about to honor. Elvis took another slow, deliberate breath, his gaze still distant, lost in the landscape of his past. The silence in the room stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was attentive, respectful. He seemed to be gathering his thoughts, sifting through a lifetime of memories, trying to pick just the right thread to pull. "I remember," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "when I was just a little kid, no more than 4 or 5 years old. We didn't have much, you know. We were poor, real poor, but I never really felt it, not in the way some folks might think. And that was all because of Mama." Paused, a tiny smile playing on his lips, a genuine one this time, full of warmth and affection. She had a way of making everything feel special, even when it wasn't like. "I remember one time it was my birthday, and we didn't have money for a cake. Most mothers might get upset or try to hide it." He leaned forward a little more, drawing the listeners deeper into his story. "She got a little bit of flour, a little sugar, not much, mind you. And she made these, well, they were cakes, not really. They were more like little sweetbreads. She'd cut a little bit of berry jam on top from berries. She picked herself in the woods near our house." His eyes seemed to sparkle with the memory, a sudden light dispelling the earlier cloudiness. "And she told me, 'Elvis, these aren't just sweetbreads. These are birthday dreams. Every bite is a wish waiting to come true,' and she said it with such conviction, like she truly believed it. And you know what, I believed her too. I still remember the taste of those birthday dreams." A few chuckles rippled through the room, soft and understanding. It wasn't a sad story. It was heartwarming, a testament to a mother's love and resourcefulness. "That was Mama," Elvis continued, his voice gaining a gentle rhythm. "Always finding the magic, always finding the good. No matter how tough things got, and things got real tough sometimes, we moved around a lot in Tupelo from one small house to another. Sometimes we lived with redder than a shed. But no matter where we were, Mama made it a home." He looked down at his hands, turning them over, his fingers tracing invisible lines on his palm. "I remember her hands. They weren't soft, not really. They were workers' hands, always busy, washing clothes on a scrub board, cooking over a fire, mending clothes with thread she'd saved up. But when she touched me, they were the softest hands in the world." He looked up, his gaze sweeping across the room, making eye contact with a few people, drawing them into his intimacy. "She'd hold my face when I was scared or when I'd scraped my knee. And just her touch, her scent of flour and soap and sunshine, it would make everything okay. She had this way of looking at you with her big, kind eyes, and you just knew you were safe, you were loved." A reporter, a young woman with a notepad, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Others were leaning forward, completely captivated. This was not the Elvis they wrote about, the wild performer. This was Elvis, the son, sharing the most precious parts of his heart. She worried, of course, he admitted, a slight shadow returning to his eyes. "She worried about me, about Daddy, about making ends meet. But she never let that worry show to me. Never. She always presented a brave face, a strong front. She was the rock. She was the one who held us all together." He leaned back in his chair, a faint smile on his face, lost in the quiet reverence he held for the woman he was describing. "She didn't have much schooling herself, but she was wise, so wise. She taught me about right and wrong, about treating people with kindness, about faith. She taught me to believe in myself, even when there was nothing much to believe in, just a skinny kid with big ears and a dream that seemed too big for Tupelo." The story wasn't just about Gladys. It was about the roots of Elvis, the foundation upon which the king was built. It was about love, resilience, and the quiet magic of a mother's devotion. And in that moment, everyone in the room felt a connection, not just to Elvis, but to the universal power of a mother's love. The initial tension had melted away, replaced by an atmosphere of warmth and shared understanding. They weren't just listening to a story, they were experiencing a profound act of remembrance. As Elvis continued, the ballroom seemed to shrink, becoming an intimate space, a living room where he was sharing cherished family memories. He had truly shed the public persona, revealing the private man beneath. "Mama loved music," he said, his voice now imbued with a gentle warmth, a hint of the melodic cadence that made his own voice so captivating. "Not like I loved it, not the rock and roll. She loved gospel hymns. We went to church every Sunday, rain or shine, and Mama would sing. Oh, could she sing?" Closed his eyes again, a tender smile on his lips as if he could still hear her. She didn't have a big, powerful voice like some of the gospel singers, but it was pure, it was clear, and it was full of so much emotion, so much faith. When she sang, you could feel it right down to your bones. She sang with her whole heart. "I remember sitting next to her in church," he continued, opening his eyes and looking out at the room. "I was just a little boy, too restless to sit still sometimes. But when Mama started to sing, I'd lean my head against her arm and just listen. Her voice was like a lullaby and a sermon all rolled into one. It made you feel safe, and it made you feel like there was something bigger than all of us, something good." He chuckled softly. "She'd always tell me, 'Elvis, listen to the words. The words are prayers, and prayers always get heard.' I guess that's where I first learned about conveying emotion, through sound, through words, not just singing the notes, but feeling them, making others feel them too." "We didn't have a record player, of course, or a radio for a long time," Elvis explained, giving context to their humble beginnings. "So Mama's singing and Daddy's humming and the church choir. That was our music. It was our entertainment, our comfort, and she was always encouraging me. I was a shy kid, believe it or not," he admitted, and a few people in the audience smiled, imagining the shy young Elvis. "God gave you that voice, don't hide it." He recounted a specific memory, his eyes twinkling. She'd hum the harmony or just clap her hands to the rhythm. She made it feel like a game, not something scary. "She didn't tell me I had to do it," he clarified, emphasizing the gentle nature of her encouragement. "She just made me feel like I could, like it was a gift, and it would be a shame not to share it. She told me, 'Elvis, when you sing, you're not just singing to the people in the room, you're singing to God, and He loves to hear a joyful noise.' So I finally did it," he said, a triumphant note in his voice tempered by nostalgic fondness. "I got up there, shook. It was a country song, but it had a gospel feel to it, all about a loyal dog. And when I finished, the applause was, well, it was more than I expected. And I looked out into the crowd and Mama was standing there, in the back, tears in her eyes. A smile so big her whole face lit up, that smile, that look of pride, that was all the reward I ever needed." Paused, letting the image settle in the minds of his listeners. "And she nurtured it like she nurtured a little plant, making sure it had sun and water just enough to grow." The room was silent again. But this time it wasn't just anticipation. It was a profound admiration for the woman he was describing. They saw Gladys not just as Elvis's mother, but as the quiet force behind the king, the first believer, the one who instilled in him the very soul that he poured into his music. And in that moment, many in the room felt a warmth spread through them, a recognition of the power of unconditional love. Elvis shifted in his seat, a thoughtful expression on his face. The atmosphere in the room had transitioned from formal press conference to an almost familial gathering. Everyone was leaning in, hanging on his every word. "So I was talking about her encouraging my singing," he said, picking up the thread. "But it wasn't just the singing. It was also the instruments, when you're poor, things like a guitar. They're not just something you pick up at the store. They're a luxury, a real expense. He paused, a hint of wistful sadness touching his eyes. For my 11th birthday, I really wanted a bicycle. All the other kids had one, and I just dreamed of riding around. Feeling the wind, I told Mama and Daddy about it. Of course, I talked about it all the time, but money was tight, tighter than ever. He continued, and Mama, she knew my heart. She knew how much I loved music. She saw me always humming, tapping my feet, pretending to play a broomstick like it was a guitar. She saw something in me that even I didn't fully understand yet. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with the memory. So when my birthday came around, there was no bicycle, and for a split second, I remember feeling that familiar pang of disappointment. But then, Mama came out with this small, dusty, beat-up acoustic guitar. It wasn't new, not by a long shot. It probably cost all of 50 cents, or maybe $1, from some pawn shop, or a neighbor who didn't want it anymore. But to me, he said, his voice rising slightly with emotion, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. She cleaned it up, polished it, tied a little ribbon around the neck, and she handed it to me, her eyes shining. He mimicked her voice, soft and sweet. Collective sigh went through the room. It was such a perfect, poignant detail. The simple gift, the profound foresight. She had that kind of faith, Elvis mused, shaking his head slightly in wonder. She didn't just believe in God. She believed in me. With every fiber of her being, she saw a destiny, a purpose. Long before I ever did, she saw past the ragged clothes and the empty pockets to something bigger. And she was right, he said, a quiet triumph in his voice. That beat-up old guitar? That's where it all started. I taught myself to play, mostly used to sit for hours in our little house, strumming. Figuring out chords. Mama would sit there with me, doing her mending arithmetic. She understood that music wasn't just a hobby for me, he elaborated. It was a language, a way to express things I couldn't put into words. And she nurtured that. She encouraged me to listen to everything, country, blues, gospel. She didn't understand all of it, especially once I started getting into the blues music, which was a bit wilder than her hymns. Her only rule was always to be respectful, always to be true to myself. He recalled his voice gentle. She'd say, Elvis, you just sing from your heart. As long as it comes from a good place, it'll reach people. And that's what I tried to do, every single time I stepped on a stage. He looked around the room, a genuine, heartfelt expression on his face. That little act of sacrifice from her giving me what she thought I needed instead of what I said I wanted, that was the first real sign to me that I could actually make something of this dream. She didn't just give me a guitar. She gave me permission to dream big. She gave me the confidence to pick it up and really play it, to really learn, to really put my heart into it. The room was mesmerized. Several people wiped away tears, unashamed. It was more than a story about a guitar. It was a story about the profound power of a mother's intuition, her love, and her unwavering belief in her child. Even when that child's dream seemed utterly impossible. Elvis wasn't just talking about his mother. He was painting a portrait of the invisible hand that guided him, the quiet strength that built a king. The silence was punctuated only by soft sniffles from various corners of the room. Elvis had taken them from his childhood home in Tupelo through the gift of his first guitar, and now he was about to move into the period of his budding career. When we moved to Memphis in '48, I was 13, Elvis continued, his voice taking on a slightly more reflective tone. I didn't know it then, but it was where my path would really begin. He leaned back, a faraway look in his eyes. Mama, worried. Of course, she was a worrier by nature, especially for me. I was her only child, her whole world. She'd seen how tough life could be. And she just wanted to protect me. She worried about the city. But she never held me back, he clarified, emphasizing the point. Never when I started hanging around Beale Street, listening to the blues musicians, absorbing it all. She didn't understand that music fully. But she understood that I needed to be around it. She'd say, "Just be careful, son, and come home before dark." Simple as that. She trusted me even though her heart was probably in her throat. He chuckled softly. When I first went to Sun Records just to record a song for her birthday. For her, you see. Always for her. I was scared, terrified, really. And she was right there with me. Not in the studio, she waited outside, but her presence was enough. She was my good luck. And then when things started to happen, he said, his voice gaining a touch of wonder, as if still amazed by it all. When Sam Phillips decided getting played on the radio, Mama was over the moon. She'd listen to the radio glued to it, waiting for my song. And when it came on, she'd call me, no matter where I was, just to say, "Elvis, they're playing your song. Turn on the radio." Her voice would be shaking with excitement. He mimicked her breathless joy, and a wave of warmth spread through the room. It was a beautiful image. The famous Elvis Presley, still delighting in the memory of his mother's simple pride. She traveled with me in the early days, he recalled, his voice softening again. Before the big crowds, before the craziness, just me, Scotty, Bill, and Mama and Daddy. Sometimes she'd sit back or in the audience, and after every show she'd come up to me, her eyes just sparkling. She didn't need to say, "My boy, you did good." But as things got bigger, the crowds got wilder, he remembered. A slight tremor in his voice. Touring got harder. It was a lot for her. She wasn't used to all that attention, all that noise. She was a quiet, private woman, and she'd worry about me on the road. Phone calls almost every night. "Did you eat? Son, are you sleeping enough?" She never asked for anything, he stressed, his voice firm with respect. She'd still be in the kitchen cooking my favorite meals, doing laundry, making the house feel like home, no matter how grand it got. Paused, a look of profound sadness touching his features. The fame, the money, the screams, it was all so much. I felt lost in it, but Mama, she was my compass. She was the one who kept me grounded. She'd look at me, and in her eyes, I wasn't Elvis Presley. He finished, his eyes holding a faraway sadness that hinted at the profound loss to come. The room was utterly still, captivated by the raw honesty and tender vulnerability he was displaying. They weren't just hearing about Elvis's rise to fame. They were witnessing the deep, unwavering love of the woman who held him through it all, and the pain of a son who would eventually have to let her go. The atmosphere was thick with empathy, many reaching for tissues, tears welling in their eyes. Elvis took a sip of water, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly. He was deep into his memories now, sharing the most intimate corners of his heart. The room was spellbound, the collective emotions mirroring the deep tenderness in his voice. "When I made my first movie, Love Me Tender," he recounted, a fond smile returning to his face. Mama was just beside herself with excitement. She flew out to Hollywood to visit me on the set. Now, mind you, she'd never been to Hollywood. She was just a whole different world for her. She was so proud, he continued, his voice soft with emotion. She didn't really understand how movies were made. All the cameras and lights and retakes. She just saw me, her son, up there on the screen, and she'd sit quietly, just watching, beaming. She wouldn't say much, but her eyes just glowed. Because no matter how big it got, no matter how many people were watching, her opinion was the one that truly mattered. "She was my unconditional cheerleader," Elvis said, leaning forward slightly, emphasizing the words. "She didn't care about the fame or the money, or the screening fans. She cared about my happiness, my spirit. And she genuinely loved seeing me happy, seeing me fulfill something that started from that old beat-up guitar she gave me." He reminisced about her reaction to his records. When Heartbreak Hotel hit big, When it became my first #1, she framed the record. Just a simple 45. But she put it in a frame and hung it in our house. She'd show it to anyone who visited, beaming like it was the greatest work of art ever created. She'd come to a few of my shows in those early explosive years. He recalled a touch of melancholy in his voice. She'd be sitting there, usually with Daddy, in the front row or just off to the side, and while the girls were screaming and fainting, Mama would just watch me, a quiet smile on her face. Sometimes, if I caught her eye from the stage, she'd just give me a little nod, a gentle affirmation. That was all I needed. She used to give me these little pieces of advice, he said, shaking his head gently. Like before a big show, she'd say, "Remember, Elvis, those people out there, they came to see you. Give them your best, but don't forget where you came from." And that always stuck with me. She kept me crumble. He shared another heartfelt detail. When I bought Graceland, it wasn't just for me. It was for her. I wanted her to have a beautiful home, a safe haven. After all those years of moving around, of living in poverty, I wanted her to have everything she deserved. And she loved it in her quiet way. She loved the garden, loved having space. But even in Graceland, he added a slight smile, touching his lips, she'd still be in the kitchen, cooking up a storm, doing the laundry, just like she always did. She was too real for that. She was the heart of that home, no matter how grand it became. She kept the soul of that place tied to our roots. She saw through all the glitter, all the craziness. He stated firmly, his voice filled with deep admiration. She saw the boy beneath it all, and she loved that boy unconditionally. She taught me about unconditional love. Not just how to receive it, but how to give it. And I tried every day to live up to the example she set. He concluded, his gaze sweeping across the tear-filled faces in the room. She was my biggest forwarder. Yes, but more than that, she was my biggest supporter. My protector. She was the calm in my storm, and I wouldn't be standing here today. Wouldn't be anything without her. She was the reason, the true reason, for everything. Many in the room were openly weeping, touched by the raw sincerity and profound love emanating from Elvis. He had not just recounted memories. He had laid bare the deepest bond of his life, painting a picture of a simple, extraordinary woman who shaped a legend. The air in the ballroom was thick with emotion. A collective wave of empathy washing over the room. Elvis had taken them on a journey from his humble beginnings to the peak of his fame, always centered around the unwavering presence of his mother. Now his expression grew a little more somber, reflecting the increasing pressures of his life and her role in it. As the fame grew, so did the demands, Elvis explained, his voice becoming a little heavier. It was non-stop records, movies, tours, interviews, personal appearances. Every single moment of my life was suddenly public, and sometimes it felt like too much, like I was drowning in it all. Paused, his gaze distant as if reliving those overwhelming moments. The crowds, the screaming, it was exhilarating. Sure, but it was also isolating. You're on a pedestal and everyone wants a piece of you. It's hard to know who's genuine, who truly cares about you. Not just Elvis Presley, the king. But, Mama, he continued, his voice softening, a comforting balm in his narrative. She was my anchor. She didn't care about the king part. She just cared about her son when I'd come home from a grueling tour, or after finishing a movie, feeling drained, feeling alone even in a crowd. She'd be there. I remember one time I just finished a movie, been working day and night, barely sleeping. Came back to Graceland and I just felt empty, like a shell. Everyone was saying, "Great job, Elvis," and wanting to talk business. Or what's next? But Mama, she just saw me. She came into my room, he recalled, his voice almost a whisper. Didn't say a word about the movie or the music. She just sat on the edge of my bed, stroked my hair like she used to when I was a little boy, and she said, "My boy, you look tired. You need rest. You need peace." And she just sat there, quietly, not asking for anything, not wanting anything, just being there. She'd bring me a glass of milk or a plate of my favorite fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches, he said, a faint, tender smile on his lips. Simple things, but they were everything. It was her way of saying, I see you. I know you're hurting. I'm here for you. She didn't try to fix it with grand gestures or advice. She just offered comfort, pure and simple, the way only a mother can. He looked around the room, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. She was the only one who truly understood the cost of it all, the cost of the fame. She saw the exhaustion, the loneliness that came with being so famous, and she never once pressured me to keep going, to make more money, to chase more fame. Her wisdom wasn't learned from books, he mused, but from life, from struggle, from a pure heart. She'd remind me, Elvis, don't let it change you. Stay true to yourself. Remember who you are and where you came from. And that was harder than you might think, when the whole world is telling you who you should be. She always reminded me about kindness. He emphasized, his voice firm with the lesson she instilled. No matter how big I got, no matter how much money I had, she'd say, always be kind, son. Always remember the little people. Always be humble. And she lived that. She treated everyone who came to Graceland, the staff, the fans at the gate, with the same respect, because that's who she was. She was my confidant, he admitted, his voice dropping to a more intimate level. I could tell her anything, my fears, my doubts, the things I couldn't tell anyone else. She just listened patiently without judgment, and then she'd offer a simple word of encouragement, a prayer, a hug, and somehow, just being in her presence, everything felt a little bit lighter. He finished, his gaze sweeping over the tear-streaked faces in the room. The silence was profound, filled with shared emotion. He had revealed not just a loving relationship, but the profound emotional support system his mother provided during the most turbulent period of his life. He had shown them the real Elvis, not the legend, but the vulnerable son who relied on his mother's unwavering love to navigate the storm of fame. And in doing so, he had opened a vein of universal understanding about the irreplaceable role of a mother. As Elvis continued his story, a palpable sadness began to settle over the room, a heavy premonition of the inevitable. His voice, which had been tender and nostalgic, now took on a fragile quality, tinged with a deep, enduring pain. Then came the time when she started to get sick, he said, his voice barely a whisper, as if the words themselves were too heavy to bear. It started slowly. She wasn't feeling well, complaining of fatigue. At first, we didn't know what it was. We just knew my vibrant, strong mama was fading. He leaned forward again, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped tightly as if holding himself together. His eyes, usually so expressive, were now clouded with a raw anguish that was impossible to ignore. She had liver problems, cirrhosis, and by the time we really understood how serious it was too late. The doctors told us there wasn't much they could do. The room was utterly silent. Every breath held. This was the part of the story everyone knew, but hearing it from him, witnessing his pain, made it fresh and devastating. It was the hardest thing I'd ever faced, Elvis admitted, his voice breaking slightly. Harder than any show, any movie, any challenge in my career, because all the money in the world, all the fame, all the power. I was Elvis Presley, the biggest star in the world. And I was utterly helpless. She had always been the strong one, the one taking care of everyone. And suddenly she was fragile. I had to take care of her. I wanted to. I wanted to trade places with her. Anything to ease her pain, but I couldn't. I remember sitting by her bedside at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. He recounted, his voice thick with emotion. For days, I barely left her side. I just wanted to be there, to hold her hand, to tell her how much I loved her. She was so weak, so frail. It was agonizing to see her like that, the woman who had always been so full of life, so full of spirit. Closed his eyes again, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. He didn't bother to wipe it away. She'd still try to smile even then. She'd look at me with those beautiful eyes, and even though her body was failing, her spirit was still there, still loving, still concerned about me, even in her pain. "Don't you worry, son, it's going to be all right." Always trying to comfort me, even when she was the one who was suffering. That was Mama, selfless to the very end. He recalled a particularly heartbreaking moment, and she just looked at me, a peaceful look on her face. Her grip on my hand was so weak, but it was still there. He paused, a long, agonizing silence filling the room. The raw grief was palpable, a tangible presence. Many in the room were openly sobbing now, unable to hold back their own tears. They were witnessing a man's deepest vulnerability, his profound sorrow for the loss of his most cherished connection. The night she passed, he finally said, his voice barely audible, "August 14th, 1958. It was like the world stopped." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed, but with a fierce, enduring love shining through the pain. They say time heals all wounds, and maybe it does for some. But for me, the wound of losing my mama, it's still there. It's a part of me. It's etched into my soul every day. I still miss her. Every single day. The room was enveloped in a profound silence, broken only by the quiet sobs of those present. Elvis had opened up a wound that had never truly healed, revealing the depth of his grief and the agonizing helplessness he felt in the face of death. It was a moment of raw, universal sorrow, connecting every person in the room through the shared understanding of love and loss. The raw emotion in the room was overwhelming, a collective wave of tears and shared grief. Elvis had laid bare his deepest wound, the loss of his mother, Gladys, but he wasn't finished. He still had more to share, more of her enduring impact. After she passed, Elvis continued, his voice hoarse but with a quiet strength that emerged from the depths of his pain. "I felt like a part of me died with her. The world just didn't make sense anymore. All the fame, all the adoration, it just felt hollow without her there to share it, to anchor me." He described the immediate aftermath, the profound emptiness. Graceland felt so quiet, so empty. Her presence was gone. It was like the heart had been ripped out of our home. I'd walk into her room and just stand there, hoping to feel her, to hear her, but she wasn't there. And that silence, that was the loudest thing I ever heard. "I struggled," he admitted, his voice tinged with the memory of that dark period. "I truly struggled. I didn't know how to cope. She had been my rock, my guide, my best friend. And suddenly she was gone. I felt lost, completely adrift." He lifted his gaze, a glint of something almost ethereal in his eyes. But then, slowly, over time, I started to realize something. She wasn't truly gone, not really. They were still with me, they were inside me. "I'd be on stage," he recounted, a faint smile touching his lips, "singing a song, and I'd think of her. I'd remember her sitting in church, singing those gospel hymns, singing with her whole heart, and I'd put more of my heart and honesty she always instilled in me. Her spirit," he emphasized, his voice growing stronger. "It became my guiding light. When I faced a tough decision, I'd ask myself, what would Ma want me to do? What would she say?" And somehow, the answer would always come, gently guiding me, just like she always did. It's not the same as having her here, holding my hand, but it's still a comfort. "She taught me about love," he said, his voice filled with profound gratitude, "the deepest, most unconditional kind of love. And she taught me how to give it. Every time I connect with a fan, every time I try to bring joy to someone through my music, it's a little bit of her shining through, because that's what she would have wanted, to bring happiness. Her greatest legacy," he stated, his voice resonating with conviction, wasn't the fame or the money or the records. It was the love she poured into me. It was the values she instilled, and treating others with respect. She made me the man I am, for better or worse, and I hope every single day that I make her proud. He paused, a long emotional silence stretching in the room. Tears in the audience were no longer just tears of sorrow. They were tears of profound understanding, of shared humanity, of witnessing a love so deep it transcended death. Elvis wasn't just talking about his mother. He was talking about the eternal power of love, the way a person lives on in the hearts and actions of those they touch. The room was not just moved, it was deeply touched, profoundly aware of the sacred bond he was describing. Elvis looked out at the room, his eyes still glistening, but now with a profound, almost spiritual calm. The raw anguish had given way to a deep, tender reverence. He had shared his heart, held nothing back. The air in the ballroom was thick with unspoken empathy, a shared understanding of love, loss, and the enduring human spirit. "So when you ask me about Mama," Elvis said, his voice soft but resonant, "you're not just asking about a person who lived and died. You're asking about the very core of who I am. You're asking about my soul." Paused, his gaze sweeping across the tear-streaked faces in the room. There wasn't a dry eye to be found. Journalists had abandoned their notepads. Photographers had lowered their cameras. They were no longer observers. They were participants in a moment of extraordinary intimacy. "She was my first audience, my first believer, my truest friend," he continued, his voice gaining a quiet, almost poetic rhythm. "She taught me to love, to give, to believe. She taught me that true wealth isn't in money or fame, but in family, in kindness, in faith." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to an almost conspiratorial whisper, yet every word carried through the silent room. "Every song I sing, every note I hit, it has a little bit of her in it. Every time I step on stage, I feel her presence. Every time I hear applause, I remember her quiet pride, her beaming smile." He lifted his hand, palm open, as if offering something precious. "She's in the way I try to treat people. She's in the way I try to connect with my fans. She's in every act of kindness I try to perform, because that's what she taught me. That's what she exemplified." "She didn't live to see all of this," he said, a quiet sadness returning. "All the records, the movies, the shows in Las Vegas. She didn't get to see me play for thousands or travel the world, but I know she's watching. And I know she's proud, and that truly is all that matters to me." He looked directly into the eyes of Mary Beth Jenkins, the reporter who had asked the initial question. "Her birthday last week, I spent it quietly, just thinking about her, remembering her laugh, her stories, the softness of her hands, the strength of her spirit. And I felt grateful for every single moment I had with her." He then looked at the room, his gaze encompassing everyone present. His eyes were shining with tears, but also with a profound love that transcended grief. "So, yes," he concluded, his voice ringing with conviction, "Gladys Presley was my mother, but she was more than that. She was my heart. She was the one who taught me to sing with my soul and to live with an open heart." He finally allowed a single tear to fall from his own eye, tracing a path down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He looked around the room, a quiet, almost serene smile on his face, a smile that radiated warmth and a deep, enduring love. And in that moment, the dam broke. The quiet sniffles erupted into open sobs. Seasoned journalists openly wept, their professional detachment completely shattered. Fans had tears streaming down their faces. Publicists, usually stoic, were reaching for tissues. The entire room, from the front row to the very back, was in tears. Not just tears of sadness for the loss, but tears of profound understanding, of shared human connection, of the universal beauty of a mother's love and a son's enduring devotion. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had just offered them something far more precious than any song or performance. He had offered them his heart exposed, his soul, and in doing so had created a moment of such raw, authentic, and heartwarming emotion that it would forever be etched in the memories of everyone present. It was a testament not just to the legend he was, but to the extraordinary woman who had loved him first, loved him best, and made him the man he was. The room was not just crying. It was profoundly moved, witnessing a beautiful, living tribute to the power of everlasting love.